Welcome to our first UEN Capitol video update of the 2021 legislative session. I'm Margaret Buckton, your legislative analyst. Our primary topic for this week is the governor's condition of the state, which she delivered Tuesday night, and we're going to talk about both her school choice policy recommendations and her budget recommendation for education. She started off in her speech talking about the priority of school choice, and she says, and I quote, "It's imperative that we have a strong public school system, but school choice isn't a zero-sum game. It has the potential to raise the standards for all schools, and for those schools that do fall behind, it ensures our children don't fall with them." Governor Reynolds then based several policy recommendations on that overarching value. First, she calls it the Students First Act. It requires schools to offer parents a choice for 100% in-person instruction. That's 5 days a week. The second is in open enrollment, and it would add a good cause exemption to the March 1 deadline for students who are at risk of serious academic failure, who haven't received adequate support from the school, and adds another open enrollment deadline for students who are attending failing schools, that's her term, defined by the Iowa School Performance Profiles. Third, it eliminates the voluntary diversity plans that 5 school districts have, that's Davenport, Des Moines, Waterloo, Postville, and West Liberty, that regulate open enrollment out based on income or English language learner ratios. Fourth, charter schools establishes a new charter school law that would allow a nonprofit or parents or community people to establish a public charter school open to all students to provide greater flexibility to serve a diverse and changing student population. They would have to apply to the State Board of Education to open their charter school. Fifth is innovative waivers. Promotes the use of an innovative waiver to grant districts flexibility to include non-traditional learning opportunities such as STEM or STEAM and work-based learning, and provide new funding flexibility that's only available with the innovative waivers. 6, education savings accounts. We call them vouchers. It allows the funds per student to be deposited in an account for the parent to use for those students who are currently attending or will be entering kindergarten at a school identified as comprehensive support and improvement based on the ESSA law. 7th, attendance and funding. She proposes to use federal relief funds to implement a statewide student information system and improve overall school data management, including attendance and updating the per-student funding methodology based on ongoing attendance. And many other states do this, where they might have 2, 3, or 4 attendance counts rather than just one like we have on October 1st to determine budgets. And then the last one, 8, is school board accountability. The budget book says amend the Iowa Code to include language stating school boards are responsible for student improvement and achievement. That's all the information we've got on that, so we'll keep you posted as we learn more. Secondly, we're going to talk about the governor's budget recommendations for education. She proposes a 2.5% increase in the SSA rate for both years, for fiscal 22 and fiscal 23. They do cost different amounts, however, because of the enrollment decline this last October 1st. So the 2.5% for next year only costs the state $20.1 million. In the next year, however, as they assume those students will come back, the price tag for the state is $139.6 million. AEA funding, she continues the $15 million reduction that's been ongoing for the last decade or so in each of those 2 years. There's also an increase of $667,000 for Transportation Equity Fund for 22. That's the SSA automatic increase that's applied to that fund. She does not include money to close the gap in the district cost per pupil, which would be a priority for the UEN as well. In-person instruction, she has a new fund, $20 million in supplemental appropriations, which means it comes out of the current fiscal year for grants to districts offering 5 days a week of instruction. And then that ESA, the Education Savings Account policy, has a price tag of $3 million to start education savings accounts in those particular school districts. The only other education line item in the budget that receives an increase that would impact K-12 schools is $1 million for the JAG program. Well, in good news this week, $345 million was sent by the federal government to Iowa to help schools with the costs of COVID, of which $310 million will be available to reimburse schools for COVID-related expenses. And those include all of the health and safety measures you've been taking, the PPE costs, et cetera, but also closing the gap and improving achievement for students. They are available for expenditures through September of 2023, and you really have to think of this as 3 years of funding over that time frame. That will also help you be able to advocate for adequate SSA, because this does not replace the need of basic funding that your districts are experiencing. Also in good news this week from the governor's budget recommendation, she does have a $30 million increase in mental health funding for both fiscal year 2022 and fiscal year 2023. Although it's not specific to children, it would provide resources for mental health in the state. And $450 million. That's a lot of money, a big investment through 2025 for affordable broadband high-speed internet statewide, which is really critical. It's the utility like electricity in prior generations that's going to make all Iowans, including our staff and students in urban schools, capable of staying connected to each other. Other items and bills to report: Iowa's financial condition. There's a deposit of extra surplus in the governor's budget that she estimates to the taxpayer trust fund of $222 million for the ending balance of both fiscal 22 and fiscal 23. There are also total reserve funds that are our rainy day funds and our cash reserve funds combined for $825.3 million in fiscal 22. So those two resources alone, over $1 billion in the financial condition supports for the state. And the fiscal year 2023 Revenue Estimating Conference last December estimated a 3.7% revenue growth for fiscal 22. So we're on pretty solid ground going forward. Well, coming up this next week and into February, with the release of the governor's budget on Tuesday, the clock starts ticking on when they have to determine school funding. The SSA legislation requires a decision within 30 days of the governor's budget. That's in the Iowa Code. So look for action by February 12th. And due to the loss of nearly 6,000 students last October 1st in the enrollment count, the state actually can invest the typical amount of $95 to $100 million and get upwards to 4% SSA if they would decide that was the priority. In our urban districts in particular, that number becomes the multiplier for our English language learner and special ed categorical funds, for all of our supports for teacher salary and professional development and early intervention class size, and also for the dropout prevention amount that you'll have in your plans next year and your instructional support levy funding. So it really is critical to focus on that highest SSA rate possible. We believe this is a better option for schools than basing the formula on last year's enrollment, and if you have questions about that, reach out to me and I'll help you go through the math together, except for one area, and that's in preschool. So we're down statewide 4,076 four-year-olds, and just in the UEN districts alone, about 1,900 fewer preschool students this year than last year. And there is no budget guarantee or on-time funding for preschool enrollment changes. So you need to advocate with your legislators to also fix that problem. Well, your advocacy action task list for this week, look at the weekly written report that's been emailed to you. It has lots of detail about the governor's budget, her policy recommendations, and other bills moving through the process. You can contact legislators about SSA and that preschool hold harmless. They're going to be getting information about that in the next week, with bills starting as early as next week to get that moving. Contact the governor. Also tell her about SSA and how they can afford the 4%. And stay tuned for more information on school choice when we find the legislative language for those particular policies. While you're at it, thank the governor for the $450 million investment in high-speed affordable internet. And then check out the new UEN Advocacy Handbook that's posted on the website for advocacy actions. We've got all kinds of resources to help you on your advocacy journey. They're posted on the website, and we've got a new website out there. So take a look at that and see if it's easier to find those things. We certainly hope it is, especially the issue briefs with the talking points on all of the UEN priorities. Also, keep us informed as you have contacts with your legislators, if they make commitments to you or if they need additional information, so we know what conversations you're having. And thank you to our UEN corporate sponsors for their support of UEN programs and services. And you can find information about how they can help your district on the corporate sponsor page of the UEN website. Most of all, thank you for your advocacy efforts on behalf of the students in Iowa and in your school. We'll see you next week.